Welcome. My name is Dimitri Nasrallah. I am the editor for Esplanade Books, the fiction imprint of Véhicule Press. And on behalf of Véhicule Press and Librairie Drawn Quarterly, allow me to welcome you to the launch of Christopher DiRaddo's majestic new novel, The Family Way. Now, before we get started, we just have a little bit of administrative business to take care of. We would like to acknowledge that we are publishing from Tiohtià:ke, the Mohawk name for a historic place of gathering and trade for many First Nations. It is unceded traditional Indigenous territory, where the lands and people have a history and legacy that is long and deep, and on which there have now been non-Indigenous settlers for more than 375 years. As writers, as publishers, and as booksellers, we know that we cannot rewrite our history, but we can be part of a concerted effort to contribute to reconciliation between Indigenous peoples and settlers. Indeed, we have a special role to play in the process. I'd also like to take this occasion to thank our launch partner, Librairie Drawn Quarterly, who have been doing such an amazing job promoting this city's writers and publishers, not only to Montrealers, but to the rest of Quebec, and even to bookstores across Canada. We would be a much lesser entity without their involvement. So thank you once again, Drawn Quarterly. A reminder that you can buy this book online at D&Q's web store. They offer curbside pickup in Montreal, and they can ship books Canada-wide. Soon you might even be able to walk into one of their stores in person and buy a book the old-fashioned way. Fingers crossed. You'll find a link in the comments section throughout the course of this next hour. Now, for those of you in the audience who are here to support Chris and may have questions for him, by all means, type a question into the comments section anytime during the event for a chance to win a copy of the book. You can do that directly on this platform or on Facebook or even YouTube. We're watching all of those sites, and we'll be collecting your questions from there. They will be selected and put forth to Chris and Rachel at the end of our hour. Now, without further ado, our two speakers for this evening are, firstly, Christopher DiRaddo, who is the founder and host of the Violet Hour, which over the past few years has grown into a foundational LGBTQ reading series for readers and authors from Montreal and beyond. The Family Way is his second novel. Véhicule is also proud to be taking this occasion to reissue his first novel, 2014's The Geography of Pluto. Chris will be in conversation with Rachel Giese, who is the editorial director of Extra Magazine, an online publication covering LGBTQ, 2S+, culture, politics, sex, relationships, and health. She is also the author of the award-winning book, Boys, What It Means to Become a Man. So please help me in giving a big welcome to Christopher DiRaddo and Rachel Giese.
Hi, Dimitri. Hi, Rachel.
Hi. Congratulations, Chris. You're going to start, I think, with some thank yous and a reading, and then we're going to get down to our conversation. So I'm going to mute myself for now and turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It really means a lot. Coming to you from my office in Petit Patrie, Rosemont Petit Patrie, Montreal. Wish we could celebrate in person, but this is the next best thing. I did want to start off with some thanks to the people who were really instrumental in helping me bring this book to life. First off, I want to thank, of course, Dimitri Nasrallah. Dimitri, you're a wonderful editor. I learned so much from you in the process, and you really helped me take the book and get it across the finish line to a place where I'm truly very proud of. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I also want to thank my new family at Véhicule Press. It's been really wonderful to be published by you. So a big round of big thank yous goes to Simon Dardick, Nancy Morelli, Jennifer Varconi, Carmine Starnino, Patrick, and everyone else at Véhicule Press. A bunch of friends also helped with feedback during the initial drafts of the book. So I also want to take a moment to thank France Dizelet, Jennifer Warren, Peter Dubé, Amar Hussein, Brian O'Neill, Tina Blakeney, Lucas Rowland, Brian Peters, and Raf Valenci. I also want to thank Neil Smith. Neil has been a wonderful supporter and friend of mine, especially near the end of the book. He was really instrumental in helping me get it finished to the point where I was really proud of it. So thank you, Neil. And then thank you to a bunch of other friends too have helped out at some point along the way. Vincent Fortier, Leslie Seidel, Pierre Roy, Anthony Johnson, Jordan Arsenault, Eric Worth. Big thanks also to the advanced readers who read and blurb the book. So big thank you to Anne-Marie McDonald, Stephen McCauley, and of course you, Rachel. I really do appreciate the blurb on the back. It's wonderful. I want to thank everyone who has supported my Violet Hour events over the years. It means a lot to me to see your faces recurring at these events, and also my family that I've developed with the Violet Hour Book Club. I really enjoy all the times that we get together. And I want to thank you all too today for being here. It might not seem a lot to kind of click a link and watch me talk for about an hour about this project, but it does mean a lot to me. So I really do appreciate you being here. Please just send a little note in the chat. Just say hello, just so I know that you were here. It would be really great for me to be able to see afterwards and to just kind of see who came. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'm going to read from the book. So the book's been out for a little while, so I know that some people have already read it. The book tells the story of a Montrealer named Paul, who on the eve of his 40th birthday is asked by two friends if he'll help them father a child. And so the book really pulls back the curtain on that process, what it's like to be a sperm donor, and also explores what it means. What does family look like? What does family mean for queer people? So I'm going to read just the opening of the second chapter. In this chapter, it's the morning after Paul was asked by his friends Wendy and Eve if he would be their sperm donor, and his partner Michael is still asleep. And I guess the only thing else you need to know is they have two cats. Their cats are named Malone and Sutherland. The next morning, like clockwork, Malone came into our room at around 7. He jumped onto the bed and with his little chirrups announced that it was time for the two of us to wake up. Michael and I did what we always do, separate and make room for the cat to curl up between us. We collapsed into half sleep as he gnawed on one of his nipples, his purrs a white noise machine keeping us under. I dozed for about another 20 minutes before pulling myself out of bed. I got up and changed into my running gear in the near darkness of our bedroom, then went out into the bright kitchen to make a pot of coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I do like the smell of it. It was a weekend tradition for me to get up on Saturday mornings and start the coffee machine for Michael before going out to grab the newspaper. I wrote him a short note on a Post-it and left it on the kitchen island. Gone for a run, back soon. Outside it was April and most of the snow had melted. My shoes kicked up pebbles as I ran across the neighborhood. Yellow patches of grass were turning green, and some of the trees had started to bud. There were not too many people out at this time, but I did pass a few neighbors on my jog to Jerry Park. Men and women in sweats and sunglasses, walking their dogs and their cell phones. Teenagers with backpacks heading out for the day. Michael and I lived in Villeray, in the central north part of Montreal. I hadn't thought to look here when we first started our search for a bigger apartment. Originally, I'd figured we would move to another rental in the village, but one afternoon, as I ogled the real estate listings, which Michael often called my porn, I came across a property on St. Denis Street. It was a 5-room apartment on the top floor of a brick-faced triplex with large windows, high ceilings, and 2 balconies. St. Denis Street is a 6-lane thoroughfare that connects the north and south ends of the island, so I was less interested in the location, thinking the rush of cars and street noise would be too much. But whoever had taken the listing's pictures knew how to play to its strengths. There was so much light and space in each room. I could easily see Michael and me and our 2 cats living there. Owning a home had long been a dream of mine. As a kid, I'd play in the model kitchens and bathrooms when we'd visit the big box hardware stores. And I'd draw make-believe houses in pencil crayon at night in front of the TV, always a 3-story mansion. Imagining the rooms on the different floors and what the gardens look like. When I got older, in my early 20s, I daydreamed about my first apartment. Most young gay men fantasize about the sex they'll have once they leave home. I did that too, but I also fantasized about where it would happen. Growing up far away from the city center in the West End suburb of Point Claire had me longing for a queer life downtown, and I often imagined what that domestic life might look like. Stark white walls, queen-size mattress, dark gray sectional, 10-speed bike against the wall by the kitchen, a table for two. After meeting with my bank, I discovered that I qualified for a mid-range mortgage and could afford the purchase price. Sure, a second income would have been helpful in finding us a nicer place. Work for Michael was erratic, and he had no savings to draw from, but I understood that. Michael had cashed in whatever he had left when he packed up his life and moved here from New Brunswick. However, there would be other ways he could contribute. I hadn't heard him return home the night before, but I did feel him getting into bed with me, the shifting of weight on the mattress, the pressure of him pulling me in from behind. I couldn't wait to tell him my news. We might have a kid, a pint-sized version of Wendy and me. How fun is that? I knew of only one other couple who'd done this, a former colleague who, with her partner, went the anonymous route. Looking at the pictures on her desk, you'd never think that they created their family any differently. But so much planning went into their kids' conception. I mean, with us, none of this ever happens by accident. Wendy, Eve, and I had spent the remainder of the previous night discussing plans. We finished off a second bottle of wine, Wendy lamenting how she would have to quit booze altogether, and the both of them asking if I too would cut back. I also had questions for them. How would we do it? When would we start? What would they need from me? We agreed to keep everything private for now and tell close friends only. Parents too, although I didn't plan on telling my dad and his wife yet. Honestly, I wasn't sure how he would react. I wasn't even sure my dad would have an opinion, but Debbie might. Generally, I didn't have a problem with my dad's wife, but she could be nosy at times. Once after I told my dad that Michael and I had rescued a cat from a barn outside the city, she called me up to tell me she thought it was a bad idea and that Malone would bring in all these barnyard diseases into our home that would either kill or harm Sutherland. She even mailed me an article about it that she had clipped from a magazine. I thought it was ridiculous, but I shrugged it off the way I did many things, Debbie said. Her behavior never bothered my dad, though. More than anything, I was relieved that he had found happiness after my mom's death, even if it did mean moving across the country to Kelowna to start a new life. My mother, when she was alive, was much more easygoing. How would she have handled this news, I wondered? How would she have dealt with the things that I did with my life? My mom died long ago when I was 21. She never learned that I was gay. She didn't get to see the man that I would become, nor did she get to meet Michael or Wendy or Eve or Danny or Charles or Alan or any of the other people who played an important role in my life. At least I had my sister Kate to confide in. I would have to tell her about this, and soon. She'd be hurt if I waited too long. But I wasn't sure how to share this news. I had no idea how she would react, what it would be like for her to hear that I might have a child, and to know that the only grandchild our dad would ever get would be from me. So thank you, The Family Way. Rachel, you were right. It was good to start off with the thank yous. You did forget people. I forgot to thank my mom and my dad, who are such wonderful supporters of me and my work. I consider them to be friends, close friends of mine, and I really do enjoy the moments that we spend together. So I really do appreciate all of their love and support. My brother as well, my brother Michael and his wife Romy, wonderful supporters of me as well. And of course, my partner Greg. Honestly, he is my joy. He's my life. And, he's been such a supporter of me in this book too. We actually kind of created all these like wonderful little baskets at some point and kind of delivered them to people. So I wanted to thank them. I'm sorry that I forgot them in the initial thank yous.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. And thank you, Chris. This book is beautiful, and I was so fortunate to read the manuscript earlier this year. And I think I had reached out to you because it was, during the pandemic, I was looking for joy, and I was looking for a sense of connection, and I was looking for moments of pleasure. And I think your book delivered all of that. And it really made me long for, hanging out in Montreal in the summertime. There just really was this very vivid sense of joy and community and coming together. And, there's just there's such beauty in the book. So thank you for writing something so extraordinary. And I'm excited to talk to you about it. So
thank you.
I know for a lot of novelists, a book begins with an image, a line overheard in a restaurant that they can't get out of their head, a sensation. And I'm wondering if what was maybe the germ of this novel? Was there a precipitating image or thought or experience where you thought, I think I've got a novel here?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of people who know me know that I actually am a sperm donor in my real life. Although this work is a work of fiction, there was that real experience of being asked by two very close friends if I would help them start a family. And as a gay man of a certain age, at the time, I was at the time, it was like close to 40. And it was like, I never thought I'd do this at this point in my life. And I realized while going through the process that no one had really written about it from the point of view of the sperm donor, right? There were a lot of books about how to have a family, a lot of like how-to guides, and a lot from the women's perspective. So I just felt that like, maybe I can kind of turn some of my feelings and some of my experiences into a work that kind of has a bit of a greater truth to it. And, the more that I wrote it, it started out being a book really just about like the mechanics of being a sperm donor. I had to give my main character friends and, people in his life. And the more that I did that, I realized, wait a second, like this is actually a lot bigger than just the story about how you conceive when you are queer people. And I realized that I was going through a lot of questioning about like kind of the relationships in my life, and like, my friends are like the world to me. And I know that they are like that for a lot of queer people, but I feel that oftentimes those kind of friendships are not seen as legitimate, I think, as like kind of like the heterosexual kind of normal, like, husband and wife and two kids and a dog and, the white picket fence. So I just wanted to throw the queer family, the chosen family, a little love. And it was really easy to do. Like, my first book took a very long time to write. It took me 14 years, which is a very long time. I wrote this in 6, which for me is like, it felt very quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was going to say that, I'm going to hold up the book now too, so everyone sees it if they haven't bought it already. The title of the novel is The Family Way. And to me, I think that title works both as a story about a gay man helping a lesbian couple conceive. But to me, the book is also about all different kinds of families. I mean, to me, the book, I think what rings so true is, I think, the specificity that you captured of queer friendships and the often blurry line between romantic partnerships and friendships and the way that they move in and out. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a bit more about, as you were writing this and reflecting on the idea of chosen family, what did you want to capture about this sort of particular queer institution of chosen family?
Well, I often think as queer people, we're raised twice, right? Like we're raised by our biological families, or not even biological, but like our like we could say like maybe traditional families, like, there are two parents or one parent who kind of raises you and you, but then kind of when you come out, you're kind of raised by your queer family, right? Like it might take you a while to find them, but that's how we learn our traditions. That's how we learn our culture. And I wanted to capture that because like when I look back at like I came out at 21 and I got really involved in community radio and in Pride. And I met, I was a publicist for like the Intergenerational Film Festival. Like I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work. And through that, I met so many wonderful people who taught me so much about queer history. I had known I always wanted to be a writer, but I don't think I had ever read a queer novel until I was maybe 24 or 25, and that's when all of a sudden it clicked. I'm like, oh, that's the kind of writer that I want to be. And with this book, I just wanted to celebrate that kind of education that a queer person gets when they come out. So like my main character, Paul, has a former lover. And this is no spoiler. He's passed away. He passed away from AIDS. And this kind of character kind of comes back through the book ever so often because he was just such an important role model for him in a way. And when I think about a lot of the role models I've had in my life, they've been men and women, right? Like, and they haven't replaced my parents, because like I said, I still have my parents, and I have a great relationship with them and I love them. But in a way, they were able to, like, some of these other people were really able to kind of teach me about queer life, teach me about sex, teach me about dating, teach me about friendship in a way that kind of all of a sudden made sense, because a lot of what I had been taught in school didn't really make sense. And that's something I was kind of hoping to do, to show that the queer family is also, there is that role too of education, I guess you can kind of say.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, one of the themes that comes up in the friendships is also intergenerational friendships, and this question of, and I think that often that is sort of taken up maybe outside of our community as, even within sometimes, as seeing those kinds of relationships as potentially predatory or exploitative. And I think this book really honors what it means to be a young queer person making a connection, whether a romantic one or a friendship one, with someone a generation older. And then in turn, that happens. And I think this is also about the transmission of culture, the transmission of love. And, you talk about your own relationship with your parents being a very loving one. But I think for a lot of queer folks, their family of origin is not often loving and accepting. And so having the intergenerational connection, I think, is often too a way to do a lot of healing if you felt rejected from your family of origin.
For sure. I mean, there are a bunch of characters in the book too have complicated relationships with their families of origin, right? So Michael, who is Paul's lover, actually is kind of estranged from his family. Someone like Charles, who is in his 50s, doesn't speak to his family anymore, right? And there are different reasons for that. And so I wanted to kind of go into that too, right? Like, because yes, not everyone has like a good relationship with their family. And they kind of have to, it's a weird thing to kind of all of a sudden find yourself, for a lot of people, like in your 20s, and all of a sudden not really being understood by anyone, and just trying to kind of set sail and trying to find your tribe, right? And it takes a while for that to happen, like, I mean, even for me, like when I first came out, I was meeting people, but I don't know, like some of them weren't really people that had my best interest in mind. But it took a while. And some of them were significantly older than me. Some of them were 20, some of them were 10 years older than me. And now I feel like in this position, as someone who's like almost 50, I kind of like having that role too with younger queer folk, right? So whether it's through like the Violet Hour reading series that I run, or the Violet Hour book club, I want younger queer people to maybe kind of love the pieces of culture that I love so much. I think a lot of people like that, right? Like you've got to read this book, you've got to listen to this album. And I love that kind of transfer between generations.
Yeah. Yeah. I wondered, I know that the book is newly out, and so a few people, not that many people would have had a chance to read it yet, but I'm wondering if you talked earlier about, not having a book about creating a family this way come from the gay male sperm donor's perspective. Have you had gay men come to you since and say they've been approached, or they've thought about it, or they would like this kind of relationship with a family? They don't necessarily want to be a very active, involved father, but they would like to have a connection with a child in some way. Has that come up?
Yeah, actually, weirdly enough, I'm not going to name any names, but someone did reach out to me and read the book very quickly, and he was in the kind of the similar position, and it was actually really fun to talk about it, because I was talking about my personal experience, he was talking about his personal experience, and we're also talking about the experience of my characters, which were also kind of different. So yeah, I feel it really felt like an untapped territory for me. And I feel like I'm really hoping it's the beginning of a lot of conversations. I am seeing a lot more, like when I was younger, it just never really felt like an option or a possibility. Like, I think, especially as like, if I wanted to raise a child with my partner, you both have to kind of be on the same page, and then you have to decide how you're going to do it. Are you going to adopt, or are you going to go the surrogacy route, which could be very kind of expensive? I don't really think a lot of, at least the gays of my generation, we weren't really thinking about that a lot. But now I am seeing a lot more queer men decide to co-parent, or are deciding to kind of raise children together as well. And I think that's wonderful. so and if people are watching right now and want to have a conversation, I'd love to talk about it. I think because it's such an interesting experience, and as I continue to, even in my own personal life, have this role with there's actually 2 young children now. I'm really excited about it, but I don't know where it's going to go, and I don't know how it's going to be. And I'd love to hear what other people who are kind of also in my situation might how they might feel.
Well, I think this is interesting too. You mentioned that Paul has a lover in a book who had passed away from AIDS, and I think of this too. You and I are around the same age, and I think that for you to be a gay man of the particular generation that came after, sort of slightly after the generation, I think that was hardest hit during the AIDS crisis. I also think about the possibility of donating sperm, I think was something that was just not even on the table for so many gay men. I also think the idea of mortality, having a legacy, imagining a future was not something that men a decade older than you, say, would have even imagined. I think that survival was so immediate and paramount that I'm not sure that this would have even been something that would have felt like a possibility. I mean, obviously it happened. I know that there are, gay men who were donors or were dads of that generation, but I don't think it's the same. I think this is an unprecedented generation to be part of a Gen X queer generation.
Yeah, there's a whole generation before me that aren't here, right? And they're kind of like, you see this a lot too in like in artwork as well, this notion of lost fathers, right? There is also kind of this like generation of people we didn't get to learn from, right? And I'm talking about it also kind of in that chosen family, queer family sense. So that's something I wanted to kind of touch upon too, because just because you maybe did not procreate doesn't mean that you don't have something to kind of give to the next generation. And a lot of like, and I do have a lot of like older men who are HIV positive in their lives, who are kind of very important to me too, in my kind of upbringing and like learning about like also the AIDS crisis. I did come of the generation where I was extremely scared. Like the moment I came out, it was just like, I couldn't envision a future. Like I didn't know what my future would look like because there wasn't so much examples of it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, we're it's not perfect, but it's a lot better now with like, advances in medicine and stuff like that. So we are kind of seeing gay men living like full lives. And, and I kind of wanted to capture that too. Like, someone like Charles, who's in his 50s and HIV positive in the book, he still has a lot to kind of give younger generations. And I kind of wanted that to kind of also be celebrated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To me, this book also in that, I mean, the book is so specific, and I think it captures a specific experience, a specific milieu, but it's also universal. I think this is a very queer book that also transcends being a queer novel. Do you have audience or readership in mind when you're writing? Do you think at all about who you're writing for, or is that something that you have to silence in your writing process?
I don't really think too much about that. I often think about myself as the reader. I write the book that I want to read. It might sound kind of strange, but like this was kind of like a book that I felt like I wanted to read when I was maybe in my 20s, right? Like I felt like it would have probably made an impact on me in a certain way because I felt that I didn't really see myself reflected in a lot of literature. The books you're reading in high school, like the classic texts, I'm like, I'm not in here, right? But even kind of starting to kind of come out, I wasn't really necessarily seeing that. And I, it's kind of a bit of a lonely person, growing up too. And so I spent a lot of time just making up worlds, right? So for me, it's always been a playground, like, kind of creating the story. And then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to take these characters and I'm going to put them out to the world. And, hopefully other people will like playing with them or spending time with them. I try not to think too much about readership because then I'm like, I feel like, well, I don't want to kind of make it so that it's popular. Don't want to make it just because like I'm going to change this about, vampires are in right now, so I'm going to put it. I'm not trying to kind of create something that would then be kind of like, it'd be great if it became this like next hot product, right? Like who doesn't want that? But
40-year-old gay men are the new vampires.
Yeah, and there's a market for that. No, I don't want to disparage that at all. But for me, it was just about like trying, like, you kind of get possessed in a weird way by the story, and then like once you start writing it, it's like, you know, you're going to get to the end of it. You don't know how you're going to get there, but then you kind of get there, and you just hope at the end of the day that people want to read the book. And so if people like me who were maybe kind of just coming out of the closet, not really sure what family was going to look like, you know, to them, like, you know, maybe they were kind of kicked out of their house. Maybe, you know, they still haven't found their tribe yet. I wanted to kind of show them that, yeah, like at some point you're going to find the right people and they're going to be there for you. And you're going to be able to grow old with them, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I want to apologize to your parents in advance for this question. So maybe your parents just want to plug their ears. Yes, take a drink, take a shot. You write sex very well. This is a sexy book, and there are some very good sex scenes in this book, which I think is high praise from a lesbian. I feel like, you know, and it's really easy to write sex badly. It's a hard thing to do it well. And I'm wondering if there is a, and I was thinking this, I don't know if you've seen the series on Netflix called Special by Ryan O'Connell.
I saw the first season, yeah.
Yeah, and he's talked a lot about wanting to portray sex in a real way, to portray gay sex in a way that felt real and funny and awkward and hot and all of the dimensions of it. And I think that you do the same in literature, that you are able to, you know, to portray it really well. What's the secret to writing a good sex scene? Again, I apologize to your parents.
That's fine. I think the secret is to write about bad sex. I think like, or just like something that goes wrong with it, because I'm very kind of hyper aware whenever with my characters, I don't want any of them to appeal too cool. You know, like sometimes when you're reading a book and then all of a sudden the main character kind of like gets laid, you know, like you could kind of see the writer just really wanting to kind of look like super cool in this moment. And I kind of prefer the opposite to happen. I kind of like taking the rug out. I like I like kind of like lighting the fire, you know, lighting the candles, pouring the wine. And then all of a sudden the tablecloth is like, you know, like, or you're spilling the wine, because I feel like those are those moments of like true humanity that I think everyone can relate to, right? Because you have in mind, maybe you have in mind the way your night wants to go, and it actually doesn't go that way. How often does something that you want to go, you know, the way you want it actually goes that way? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's why I feel like sometimes with sex scenes, there has to be a point to it.
Right.
You know, if you're writing kind of erotica, there's that point, right? You're trying to kind of turn on your reader. In a book like this, if I'm putting a sex scene there, it's like, well, I kind of want to, everyone likes a little bit of sex in their TV and in their popular entertainment. But I also kind of, if I'm going to put a scene in there, it's got to have some kind of like, I would say reason. Like it's got to be almost like a plot point. There's something that's got to happen around it. Yeah. And then I find you actually feel it more because you actually kind of, there's a lot kind of writing on that scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true. I think I would say that it's that in the novel, it's either to reveal something about a relationship dynamic, to add maybe a wrinkle in the story, to add an element of conflict, or to reveal something about a character. I mean, I think it does feel very organic to the lives of the characters in the novel.
And even in terms of like the sex scenes, there's also like the non-sex scenes, right? Which are also like the sperm donation, right? Like there's a lot of, you know, ejaculations in the book, but they're not all kind of like as tittillating. But like I also kind of wanted to do that as well, because it's like, you know, procreating as queer people, it's a very different process, you know, than it is probably for most people.
We'll stop talking about sex now. I do want to remind people, Chris and I are going to talk for a little bit longer, but please pop your questions in the comments if you haven't already. And we're going to get to the Q&A in about 10 minutes or so. So I want to make sure that everyone who has a question gets a chance to do it. You talked earlier about this, you know, the autobiographical nature of the novel. Were there, in doing so, when you're, you know, kind of, I know this is not your story, but obviously you're drawing on some personal experience. Did you have for yourself, spots where you were thinking that's too intimate or that feels too close to what happened? Or were there moments when it was like, I need to find a way to fictionalize this because this was just too good or too funny or too telling for me not to draw on this, even if you weren't drawing on the facts, but perhaps the truth of the emotion of a particular moment? Were there sort of no-go zones for you in bringing autobiographical elements in, or were there moments where you thought, I have to dig in?
That's a hard question. I'm going to have to kind of answer it carefully. Yes. And I'm not going to say what those moments were, because, one of the things about, and I think a lot of writers are like this, like not all writers, but like a lot of us draw upon the things that happen in our lives. You just look at like the books that come out and you can kind of see, even if you don't know, you're kind of putting two and two together about like these writers. And I'm sure people are doing that with me. And it is true that there are kind of things that have currently happened to me, or also my friends, like, maybe my best friend or maybe somebody else. I'm like, well, this is kind of going in the book. I've had a couple friends read it and they're like, I can't believe you put that sentence in the book. For instance, oh God, like I won't say who it's for, but like, this whole thing, like there's this scene where like one character calls his boyfriend's penis like whale breech, right? Like, which is this weird kind of thing where it was just like this, he was describing it. It's like his penis looks like a whale breaching out of the water. I have a friend and that's how he just described, and so it was just like, okay, well, this is going in the book somehow. I'm not really sure how. It's just so perfect because it's actual. So I feel like, I keep a journal of things that kind of happen, and I look through it occasionally, and sometimes I kind of pick things out, but I try to kind of mask them in a way so you don't know, did it happen to me? Did it happen to someone else? I would hate to kind of get to the point where somebody felt bad about something that I included in the book, right? Because, whether it's, I'm not even going to do it for instance, but like, some people might read stuff and go, okay, well, this probably really happened. In order to kind of respect some people's privacy, in order to kind of respect, I guess just privacy, I kind of don't really go into that. But I also feel it takes away sometimes the magic from the story. Like, does it really matter like what happened, what didn't happen? All I just wanted to kind of sound is authentic, right? And if I'm able to kind of like figure out those things that either, happened to me in the process of being a sperm donor, or something that my friend happened when he, that time that he dated someone who cheated on him, like these things, I'm like, okay, well, that actually, if I can kind of fictionalize that, it's just going to sound really authentic in the book. And and that's what I'm kind of looking for, is those moments of authenticity.
This is also a very Montreal novel to me. I feel like the city, and in your blurb from Anne-Marie MacDonald on the front cover, she talks about it being, a bittersweet tale of Montreal. And I think there is something about this setting that feels very important. This feels like the cadence of the city, the rhythm of the city. You write in English, but there is the bilingual nature of the city that comes to life in the book. The bars, the restaurants, the parks, all of it feels it really does feel like a love letter to the city as well. And I wonder how you feel shaped by the city as a writer.
Very much so. I can remember my early days of being a writer. I never wanted to set my stories anywhere. I wanted them to be these fictionalized kind of Shangri-Las. But I got over that very quickly. I realized that I didn't need to make up settings so much because I was so inspired by the city around me. I actually feel like the city talks to me, like not like actually like I'm hearing its words, but like it shows me things constantly. Like one of the things I did a lot in Geography of Pluto, my first book, was graffiti. Like, and I remember like there were times in my life where I was kind of lost, not really sure what to do. And I'd come across a piece of graffiti that would be like, oh my God, like, is this for real? And in a weird way, I feel like I'm kind of got Montreal in my ear. It's constantly whispering things to me. So it's like, set this here. Why don't you put this over here? Where, like, trying to figure out where like Michael and Paul lived also was, I had them in St. Henry for a while. Then I put them over like, in the Village. And then I'm like, no, it's going to be St. Denis. And I don't know if I could write so confidently about another city when this one seems to have my full attention.
Well, and I think that even people who are unfamiliar with the city, the specificity becomes a universal experience, right? I think that, if you really set a story in a place in a specific way, even if no one knows it's true, like even if no one knows the meaning of the neighborhood, I think what becomes clear is, they're those kind of gays who live in that neighborhood as opposed to this neighborhood. Like all of those things come through, I think, when you are that specific in your storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's better to call it a BMW rather than calling it a car. Even if you don't drive a BMW, you know what I mean when I say a BMW, and when I say a car, you're not really that sure. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. I have one more question, and then I wanted to open it up to get comments in, because I think we have a bunch of questions for you. We're here virtually. We were chatting before this event of, the experience of doing this online. And, I had the great fortune of being at one of your Violet Hour events in Montreal, and it was really fun. And obviously, as a writer, you're not having the experience of getting to have an in-person launch. This pandemic year has, changed so much for so many of us. And I was wondering how this year has been for you as a creative person, as a writer. Have you found that this year has the isolation of it, the kind of forced to kind of stay in one place, has that sapped your creativity, or have you found yourself, has this been a fruitful time for you?
It has been a fruitful time, and I know it hasn't been fruitful for a lot of people. So, I kind of feel like we shouldn't have to feel that we need to be productive. So I want to kind of say that to people out there who might be kind of like, I'm not productive. But for me, it actually ended up being very productive. I'm a person who, all my friends know this, I'm extremely busy. If you want to go for lunch, how's 3 weeks from next Tuesday? That's not going to happen, right? And the pandemic forced me to stop everything. It took everything away from me. It even took my job. It took my reading series. It took my job. It, took my friendships. And it just said, just stop and sit and figure out what you want. And it was a hard thing to do because I wasn't sure for the longest time. But I actually really enjoyed not working. I enjoyed not having all of these commitments that even though I really do enjoy, creating series and doing all this stuff, and I was able to kind of finish like the last 20% of this book, right? And it just kind of fell in the right time where I was just like, I can't actually focus on anything else, just this. And then even my next book, I'm like a third through it, just also by like having this time. If there was ever a case for universal income, I think this is it. So yeah, but I am really looking forward to kind of like filling up that time again. I have missed all of you out there watching. I cannot wait to hug you all. I cannot wait to entertain you at the next Violet Hour we do in person. I can't wait, Rachel, for you to come back to Montreal,
yes,
Toronto, and to catch up together over a beer or a drink or a coffee or something. So I am looking forward to that. But I did learn a lot in this time. And I learned also just to kind of stay in the moment. Tomorrow's never really a given, and you should be doing what you want to do today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a perfect note to end on. I know we have a bunch of questions. So Jennifer, I think through the magic, there we are. So Monica here, Chris, I found a Wi-Fi connection. That must have been stressful for Monica. What made you decide to do this as fiction instead of memoir?
Well, first of all, there wasn't a lot of drama in the real experience. I felt like it might be a bit boring. Maybe 10, 15 years from now, I might actually feel differently. But I felt like to that point where I was ready to start the book, and like, all the things I wanted to say about queer family, I also didn't want to write about my friends without their permission also, right? Like I kind of, maybe there's something that one of my friends actually kind of experienced that would be good for the book, but not everything. So, some people end up being some of the characters end up being an amalgamation of several people, right? And if I had to do this as a nonfiction book, I'd have to kind of do it as I wouldn't be able to invent. I wouldn't be able to kind of make up. So I'm kind of hoping that like as a fiction, I'm able to kind of get to some kind of universal truth that doing it as nonfiction, wasn't going to necessarily allow.
Yeah, great. Next question. Michael V. Smith. Hey, Michael. What did you do differently writing this book from the first? Was the process different the second time around?
Yes, it was. I had no idea how to write a book that first time. The geography of Pluto, I decided wasn't going to be linear. So I had Post-it notes all over the place. And I'm like, okay, well, chapter 3 is now going to be chapter 13. And then chapter 5 is going to be chapter 8. And I was learning as I go. Like we were talking there about like description and detail. And I was also learning like how do you show without telling? I was very good at telling. I could tell you exactly everything that happened instead of showing you. So a lot of that was learning the craft of writing because I didn't study it. And then this time around, because I had been through this, because I had kept a journal, I actually had like all the baby making stuff, like the mechanics of it, like I had it all down. So I already had like a structure. And I discovered Scrivener, which is this amazing software for writing. I don't know if you know it, Rachel, but like it allowed me to be able to kind of focus on my book in a way that having disparate word files weren't able to do. And so 14 years for the first one, 6 to 7 for this one. Hopefully the next one will be 3. That's my, if I can kind of like keep cutting them in half, that would be perfect.
Yeah, get to the Stephen King thing where you're just putting one out a year, just churning them out. Yeah. Do we have another question? Leslie in Montreal. Does Paul have a naughty side that you kept hidden from readers? There wasn't much hidden. What do you want, Leslie?
I think, there's that scene where, well, I don't want to give away too much, but there's this scene in Toronto where Paul goes and meets up with a person that was like a road less traveled. And I think, I kind of craft Paul as being this child of the 90s, like coming out in the 90s, which is like post-AIDS. So there is a lot of fear. Like, I think, Paul is like, there's that kind of like residual fear from that time. So I feel like, yeah, he does. Like, I think there's a moment in the book where he says, like, I kind of wanted to be more sexually adventurous, but I just couldn't be. It's just not me. And so I feel like, maybe if this was another era, had he been born 10 years later, like Michael, like, Michael is a little bit more sexually adventurous, I think, than Paul. And I think that's also kind of something about the generations.
Yeah. Yeah. Medri Purdom. Hi, Christopher. Congratulations on your book. That was a great reading, and this has been a really enjoyable conversation. What are some of your favorite families in fiction? Oh, that's a great question.
That's a great question. Queer-wise, like there's like Ethan Mordden has written a bunch of books called The Buddy Cycle. There's about 4 or 5 of them, and they're all about a bunch of friends living in New York City in the 70s. I love them. Like they're not. I mean, when I say they're not like groundbreaking literature, but I love them just because in the same way I love Tales of the City, right? Like it's kind of like these like interconnected stories and dramas of different people. Tales of the Cities would be another kind of like favorite family in literature. Ethan Mordden also wrote this other book called How Long Has This Been Going On To, which kind of chronicles gay life since like 1949 to like, I think it ends in like in the 90s. I love that as well. Trying to think here. Michael Cunningham wrote a really great book called Flesh and Blood, which is about one American Greek origin family, and it's like the mother, the father, and there are 3 kids. One of the kids is gay, one of the kids is trans, and one of the kids is a straight girl. I love that book. I'm trying to, I want to say rewrite that book, but my next book is heavily inspired by that. It's like kind of an epic family saga, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Christine Lee, can you tell us about how your community involvement in Pride and with Violet impacted or inspired your writing? Oh, another good question. These are really good. You've got some really smart friends, Chris.
I've met, and thank you, Christine. I've met so many people through this series, which is kind of incredible. Like, I started this series because like when my book came out, I had like maybe like 1 or 2 invitations to read. I didn't have a ton of them. And I felt like, my publisher also didn't have like money to bring me across Canada. I wasn't going to be doing a tour. And I was also seeing like a lot of other kind of LGBTQ writers were also coming out with books. So it's just like, why don't like, give people a reason either to travel to Montreal or I was missing a lot also Landrogin, which was our gay bookstore. I kind of wanted a space where like readers could kind of get together with writers, to kind of like discover new writers and also readers to discover new books. So in that way, I've realized, like, I'm going to say it's like inspired my work. Like, I realize there's an audience out there for these kinds of stories, which I don't think I knew. You know, when I say that I was writing for myself, like, because I knew that, like, you know, I liked spending time in this world I was creating. Maybe someone else will discover this book. Maybe people will like to read it. But after a while, I realized, no, there's a lot of people out there who like LGBTQ literature. And so it's encouraged me to keep doing it. You know, like, if no one ever came out to a Violet Hour, if we were like 5 people or 2 people, I probably would say, oh, well, I tried. But because it keeps kind of like bringing people back and new faces, and new people are publishing books all the time, it just gives me kind of the energy to kind of keep going. And, you know, I kind of want to keep doing this as long as I have the energy to.
That's great. Brian Busby, Chris, you mentioned looking at the end of the novel, but not knowing how you'll get there. Did you have the ending in mind when starting The Family Way, or did it come to you later?
I think I knew right away how I wanted it to end, and I'm not going to say
yeah, don't spoil
more than that.
Yeah.
I will say the one thing. I actually wrote an epilogue for the book that's not in the book. And I talked with Dimitri about this, and I'm very happy we didn't put it in the end, because I liked the tone. I liked the way that it ended. And, you know, maybe there'll be a future edition years down the line where we put it in. But in a weird way, I kind of feel like I'm not sure if I'm done with the characters yet. And I feel like if I had included this epilogue, then it would have kind of preempted any kind of like return. So, so yes, I knew how it was going to end, but I don't think I knew that I wasn't done with the characters.
Anthony Portalese. Hi, Chris. Are there any themes or ideas from GOP?
Geography of Pluto.
Oh, Geography of Pluto that you re-examined in a new light for Family Way. Thanks for sharing. XOXO.
Oh my goodness. Let's go for a coffee and talk about that one, Anthony. I mean, I had to reread the book recently for like the typeset for Véhicule Press, and I was surprised. I don't know if you feel this way, Rachel. Sometimes when you reread stuff that you wrote a long time ago, it's kind of written by a stranger. So sometimes I don't know. I don't know. I think my main character is, if you read both books, I think Will in Geography of Pluto and Paul in The Family Way, they're not dissimilar. And, you know, both of them are kind of like me. Like, you know, like if you know me, it's going to be really impossible to not see myself in either of those characters. So I feel like, you know, I couldn't have made like The Family Way a sequel to the Geography of Pluto. But I feel like in a weird way, like there is kind of like who Will is in the Geography of Pluto could have been who Paul was in his 20s. So, you know, yeah. Let me think about that, Anthony. Well, like I said, we'll go for a coffee. But
well, and I think it's interesting for you to know that Geography of Pluto is maybe something that you feel is complete. But with The Family Way, it may be something where you feel it is maybe not unfinished, but that maybe you have unfinished business with these characters, which I think is interesting. I'm getting a note from Jennifer that we have time for 2 more quick questions. Okay. So the first one, are you happier with book 2, or were the 2 experiences equally enjoyable in their differences?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. They were equally enjoyable. I mean, I think I have a lot of fun as for the Geography of Pluto, because I had no idea if it was ever going to be published, right? Like, I'm just kind of doing this because I like it, you know. You know, think about Chris when he was like in his, 18, 17, just like doing doodles on cocktail napkins, and just maybe one day I'll be a writer or whatever. But like, I've got Monday off. Let's just spend some time listening to like music and, you know, writing up something. So that to me, it was really beautiful. Like, it was such a beautiful experience just writing it and not really caring. And then The Family Way, it's just like, oh, there's, you know, I published 1 book, so it's kind of likely that, like, you know, I didn't completely fail in the first one. So that's damning with faint praise. No, I was very happy with the first one. But this one, like, I did want it to come out more quickly, you know, like, because I also want to write the next one and the one after that and the one after that. So they were also, Pluto was also, I want to say a sad book, but it was very heavy. There were a lot of kind of heavy moments in it. And when I stopped it, I'm like, I want I want to laugh with the next one. And so I tried to make this one as funny as possible. So hopefully people out there, if you've read it or are reading it, you're laughing with the characters, because I wanted there also to kind of have like a bit of a 180 and actually kind of spend some time in just ridiculous joy with these characters.
Mm-hmm. Last question. Do you have a third book in the works? And I think you were talking a little bit, I don't know if you're superstitious and you don't want to talk about it, or if you want to chat just maybe a little bit about what you're working on.
Thank you, Sue. I think I said, I'm interested in like family epics. Like the Flesh and Blood Michael Cunningham book was a big inspiration for me. And I'm kind of interested in doing like a Canadian version with an Italian-Canadian family. I'm taking part, I'm one of the contributors of a anthology coming out soon called Here and Now, an anthology of queer Italian-Canadian writing. There hasn't been a lot of writing about queer Italian-Canadians, and I kind of find that odd. And it also kind of excites me, because I realize that there's also kind of newfound territory there. So I kind of want to write that story too. I won't say much, but I'm setting it in 1989. I'm setting it in the suburbs of Montreal, and it's gonna explore Italian Canadian family, 5 people, mother, father, actually 4 people, mother, father, son, and daughter, and it's going to deal with queerness, masculinity, violence. It's going to be, it won't be a funny book, but I'm hoping it'll also be an emotional book the way that the other 2 are.
Mm-hmm. That's it. I think Dimitri is coming back in to join us. Hey,
I'm right
Dimitri.
here, just waiting in the wings. Thank you, both of you. On behalf of the entire audience, let me just give you a round of applause. That was wonderful, really quite fascinating. Rachel, thank you so much for leading that conversation seamlessly. You guided us through this hour-long journey with grace and such intelligence. Christopher, you really opened your heart to us, and it was fascinating to watch. I mean, I've always known you to be a generous person with your insights and with your stories. And it's just like reading a chapter out of the book, listening to you. Your voice is so close to that in the book. So for those of you out there who haven't yet had a chance to pick up the book, it's like having a conversation with Chris, a very long coffee that you never want to see the bottom of the cup. I'd edit that myself as an editor. But another thank you to our wonderful audience. So many great questions, comments of support coming in the comments. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you to Librairie Drawn Quarterly for collaborating with us once again. Your participation is always so integral to the success of these books, and such an amazing team here in Montreal doing wonderful work for just the small number of people that are actually there. I believe we have a winner that we will be looking for. And the winner is, for this book giveaway, is Christine Lee. So Christine, your job now is to write to marketing@vehiculepress.com, and we'll be happy to pass along a copy of the book to you. If Chris happened to deliver one to your door, perhaps it would make a great present to pay forward as well. For the rest of you, if you don't have a book yet, number one job right after this, go buy the book, preferably from Drawn Quarterly, and it'll make a great summer read. Once again, thank you to both of you for such an evocative conversation, and thanks for everyone for joining us. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.